Sometimes something is so blatantly obvious that even Joe Biden can't help but be honest about it. Well, sort of.
Welcome to Courage and the Constitution. I'm just a guy digging behind the headlines to get to the nuggets of truth. I'm tired of the rhetoric and the propaganda. I'm being lied to by the media. I just want to know what's going on in the world. So let's do this.
I've got a quick question for you. How do you fit this in here? Well, that answer is simple. A bag of Black Rifle coffee. Just black. Gosh, I wish they were a sponsor. Now, this video could get a bit spicy by those who cannot help themselves from seeing race or racism in everything. A shadow on the wall. Racism. Somebody walks by and doesn't smile. Racism. Somebody walks by and smiles. Racism! Well, you know what? Sometimes it has nothing to do with race. And it's risky to say that today. But somebody just needs to have courage to come out and actually say it. And it's true. Sometimes it has nothing to do with race, but everything to do with social and economic hardships within a culture and or demographic, particular community. Now, at least Joe Biden realizes that much. That still does not stop he and Kamala Harris, however, from getting on the good ship, the SS Panda. Now, I do like to have brief moments of levity in my videos, but in this one, I want to treat it with just a bit more reverence because the dangerous precedent being set by Biden and Harris and how it will actually harm communities already riddled with violence by leaving even more people as defenseless victims. Now, in the back of your mind, as you consider disarming people, remember, especially in the most violent areas of this country, the Democrats have also been pushing to defund the police. So, let's jump into Biden-Harris's website to this next particular part of infringement upon our constitutional rights and take a look. Tackle urban gun violence with targeted evidence-based community interventions. Daily acts of gun violence in our communities may not make national headlines, but they are just as devastating to the survivors and victims' families as gun violence that does make the front page. And these daily acts of gun violence disproportionately impact communities of color. But there's a reason to be optimistic. There are proven strategies for reducing gun violence in urban communities without turning to incarceration. For example, Group Violence Intervention organizes community leaders to work with individuals most likely to commit acts of gun violence, express the community's demand that gun violence stop, and connect individuals who may be likely perpetrators with social and economic support services that may deter violent behavior. And these types of interventions have reduced homicides by as much as 60%. Hospital-based violence intervention engages young people who have been injured by gun violence while they're still in the hospital, connecting them to social and economic services that may decrease the likelihood that they engage in or are victims of gun violence in the future. Biden will create a $900 million 8-year initiative to fund these and other types of evidence-based interventions in 40 cities across the country, the 20 cities with the highest number of homicides, and 20 cities with the highest number of homicides per capita. This proposal is estimated to save more than 12,000 lives over the 8-year program. So as I said, the content of this video certainly has very real trigger points for a lot of people, which is why I'm going to forego the levity and handle it with a bit more reverence. So, what we read, it's a lot, and it's way too much to break down thoroughly in a video just a few minutes long, so let's just go ahead and touch on the highlights. Joe does acknowledge that there are daily acts of gun violence in urban areas. He's also correct that these communities are predominantly communities of color. This is not to say, however, that, let's take black for example, that black people equals violence. That's not true. They don't. It just happens to be that many of these people who live in these environments are black. This is not a race or racism issue. This is very much a social and economic issue, much exacerbated by the nefarious and selfish intent of Lyndon B. Johnson and the Democratic Party throughout the years. Now, that's not the only cause, however, but it is a very, very significant underlying factor. Now, there is a culture that has risen up in many of these urban communities that, for some, celebrates a certain committed acts of violence. It can be a part of an initiation into a group of people that feels like family, commonly known as gangs, especially to young men who have not had a strong and healthy father figure in the home, which, in the struggle of these communities, is a very high percentage. All the numbers and such are for that's all for a different video. But suffice it to say, the fatherlessness issue, which is both a cause and a symptom, plays yet another enormous and significant role. In both listening to and having conversations with people who have either come from these areas or are active in them, there is definitely a culture, especially around the identity of, how do we call it, thug life, that is celebrated. And it gives credence to many of the young men who don't have, they don't know another way to live, because it's not really their fault. It hasn't been exampled for them. Nor have they been instilled with a strong intrinsic personal value and worth and self-belief that they don't have to follow that path in order to be something in life, even though they have every potential within themselves to do so. And not to derail from the subject, but this was part of what was so important and so significant about the opportunity zones that President Trump was signing the funding for. Is it a perfect solution? No, but no solution is. However, a conglomerate of many good solutions can turn the world around for people. However, an irrational left, just drunk with this manufactured hatred, would not recognize Trump's work to help these communities. Work which so many black leaders came out and praised him for. But they have a deaf ear and a blind eye to it. Another crippling ingredient is that of organizations that praise the erosion of the nuclear family. They praise the strong and healthy masculine being faded from their place in the community, and they praise the effeminate, passive, and submissive version of a male being put in the man's place. So groups like this, they are toxic, and they will never, ever, ever, regardless of the marketing around the organization's name, actually create the right and healthy kind of sustainable change that these communities need. But looking back and now that section of Biden's plan, I really like to think of myself as an objective thinker and somebody who will give credit to anybody that when they deserve it, even if I don't particularly like them. On the surface, Biden's statement that there are ways to curb gun violence in these areas without the incarceration, it's a good statement. I actually do agree with it. I like it. Now, of course, up until now, the great and merciless prosecutor Kamala Harris, well, until now she didn't agree. But for her to be honest, will not do much to help her board the SS pander and sail the high seas of political gain and power grabbing. And as much as I agree with that statement of Biden's, I really can't speak confidently into it. What I can say is that I feel confident that their strategies are actually just as pork as fat in a bill, as we saw with that bill the Democrats tried to push, the little tip to give Americans of that stimulus money, even though the Democrats are the ones who are the ones that caused all the needless suffering and hardship on people, and that tip given while also giving billions to other nations and completely unrelated causes. But Biden's plan here, it's dangerous gun control. That's really what it is. I'll explain. I mean, that's been his plan all along. He couches it in some really nice terms and some great words, but why do I feel confident about that? Well, it's this. It's because of his mention on his website, in that plan, he had the words proven strategies. Now, those words on his site, they're a hyperlink. Okay? And I tried to get to the hyperlink, and all the times that I tried, I actually received a navigation error. But what it did do was it landed on a broken page for Giffords. And that's a group of anti-gun, anti-freedom, anti-constitutional, and anti-Second Amendment, and anti-self-protection that is just as dangerous as Bloomberg's group, Moms Demand Action, in Everytown. Unfortunately, all the ways that I attempted to view those strategies in detail, I was just met with frustration. So, out of necessity, we have to move on. Let's read this part. For example, group violence intervention organizes community leaders to work with individuals most likely to commit acts of gun violence, express the community's demand that gun violence stop, and connect individuals who may be likely perpetrators with social and economic support services that may deter violent behavior. These types of interventions have reduced homicides by as much as 60%. Now this I like, but again, it only goes surface deep. Just as with proven strategies, group violence intervention is yet another broken navigation to Giffords on his site. That in itself should tell you the actual intent behind the great sounding part of Biden's plan. So and what's frustrating is I really wanted to give him credit for it. And to be clear, it's not the broken link, it's where it goes to Giffords. It can't be more telling. He partners strongly with Giffords, and they are anything, and I'm telling you, they are anything but honest and ethical and principled. Social intervention is great, and I applaud it. And people going in and changing the violent aspects that have become just so ingrained and embedded into many of these deep urban Democrat cultures, it's great. And I feel like it's actually the right approach. But just enforcing gun laws, that's not going to help. It's only going to disenfranchise the legal gun owners who have no ill intent whatsoever. As we see, and as I've said over and over, those who engage in violent crime using a firearm by and large utilize illegally procured and stolen black market purchases. Everything that the politicians say that they want to be illegal, it already is. Unfortunately, the praise for Biden is really short-lived, as when reading articles from such as The Hill and other left-celebrating publications, it becomes clear that the idea of community involvement is actually by enforcing absolutely draconian gun control, bans, and confiscation. Not just in these urban areas also, mind you, which Biden and his ilk claim that they want to help, but nationally, in every state, in every county, and in every town. You might have a hard time pushing something like this in, I don't know, someplace like Keene, Nebraska, but it's not going to stop him from trying. The point is, the great sounding language and positively spun legislation, it's all a Trojan horse. And I'm going to use that term over and over because it's just like how a virus spreads in a computer when somebody opens an innocent looking link. It only grows and it multiplies and it ends up destroying everything that it touches. And in relation to constitutionally protected rights, the greatest of all God-given human rights is to protect one's life, to protect oneself and the lives of those he loves. Biden and Harris are the virus that wishes to consume those liberties in exchange for a stronger position of unchallenged profitable power, and that in exchange for actually leaving vulnerable people in the statistically dangerous areas disarmed and unable to protect themselves, making them easy sitting targets and victims, soft targets for those who for many reasons that they're going to do what they're going to be doing, are hardly going to think twice about violent crime, even up to ending somebody's life. Well, at least the police show up in an instant, right? And at least they're not being defunded. So what do you think? Do you trust Biden and Harris on this, or can you see through their clever language and read what they're actually saying? I would love to hear what you think. And if you find this content of value, then I would love to ask that you like, share, and subscribe. That'll help me grow the channel and reach more people. And in doing so, it'll help us all out. Thank you.